Hello, welcome to this week's Supply Chain Talk on demand planning with end-to-end visibility and real-time data. I'm Laura Hobbs and I'm going to be your host for today. We are joined by a great panel of guests, and thank you to our sponsors for today's talk, Tive, who will also be joining us for the discussion. Those of you who have joined one of the Supply Chain Talk sessions previously, you'll know there is a prize up for grabs. For the person asked the most interesting question, they will receive a very sought after, and in keeping with this particular Supply Chain Talk, it's in high demand, the Supply Chain Talk mug. Unfortunately, we couldn't quite manage to forecast me hosting this session, so I don't have a sample to show you. However, if you look back over the last few sessions, you'll see Duncan eloquently demonstrating the mug for you. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you, and I hope this will be a really good interactive session. We will, of course, answer questions throughout the session, so please do say hi on the group chat and introduce yourselves. I can see already a few of you have joined. Hi, James, and hi, Thomas from Ghana. Excellent. So with every supply chain talk, we start by looking at a recent news article. And hopefully the news article will appear. Can anyone see the news article? Oh, here we go. Technology has not let me down today. So, as with every supply chain talk, we start by looking at a recent news article. This particular article caught my eye. The IDC's recent research suggests by 2023, 50% of all supply chain forecasts will be automated using AI to improve its accuracy. The IDC research was quite forthcoming in suggesting the only one thing that has been universally true about any forecast is that it'll be wrong. I, however, would not want to be so critical around these forecasts, as the one thing I have learned during the pandemic is some data is better than no data. However, I think we all agree we could make improvements around our demand planning. With discussions around being more resilient, this is a difficult challenge for all of our supply chains. And in a climate where uncertainty is the new certain, it brings a real challenge to all of our industries. At this point, I would like to welcome our guest, Jay Kaganti, to the stage. Jay is the Vice President of Supply Chain at the Estée Lauder Companies. Jay has more than 24 years' experience in leading and transforming complex supply chains. Jay is also joining us from the US today. So good morning to you, Jay.
Hi, good morning, Laura.
Hi. So you've obviously read the article. I'd like to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting article, Laura. When I looked at the article, right, three things really popped up in my mind. The first and foremost, I think demand planning is always considered as the top of the pyramid. If you look at all the supply chain performance metrics, there is a cascading impact of demand planning on everything we do, right? Whether it's a inventory, service, right? There's a massive impact on it. At the same time, it's probably one of the most complex area within the supply chain. We know historically forecasting, statistical method, they all existed forever. But demand planning is also as much as an art form, not only it's a science, right? So how do you really bring, science and humanities together is really the crux of the demand planning. That's number one point. I think IDC article touched upon very important area, right? Especially, if you look at most emerging trends, recent trends, there is a massive shift towards using AI, machine learning in forecasting, right? If you look at most of the AI technologies, and I touched upon this in one of the global AI conference, predictive models are heart and soul of the AI. It's not only for the forecasting. If you look at any complex supply chain problems, whether it is a product portfolio management, assortment planning, or even labor planning, right? If you look at any of those things, predictive models are behind all of this. Now, why there is a lot of interest on AI, especially in the demand planning space, let's spend a couple of minutes on the why part. If you look at the forecasting, right, one of the most complex area, I'll give the analogy of the weather forecasting, right? Just take, for example, we know, weather forecasting is most complex, largest data sets. Can anyone guess what is the accuracy of the next 10 days forecast from weather standpoint? Any guess? I'll share. I mean, it's a 50% accurate. In spite of having billions of data points, right, with all the most advanced sophisticated algorithms, you can only predict 50% accurately, and it improves when you go to 5 days forecast. It is 80% accurate. Why forecasting is so complex? And especially, what is the relation with the supply chain? Supply chains are becoming as complex as weather forecasting, right? If you look at the volatility or past 2 years during pandemic, we saw it's at 10 times. Then we see the portfolio complexity, right? The ever adding the products, right? The number of products, its variance, there's a degree of complexity is just multiplying 10 times. Also, the customer channel divergence and proliferation, right? There are a lot of players in marketplace. So if you add all this, right, this is, any typical forecasting, we are talking about millions of combinations. If you look at the product, markets, region, customers, so there is a huge complexity around it. That's where AI really plays a big role, right? We know demand planning is all about, getting the data, micro segmentation of the data, and doing it faster cycles, right? You don't want to wait for 1 month to do a forecast. You want to do it faster. So altogether, it is also demanding hugely on not only accuracy, precision, because we want to make sure we have right product in right time, right place. So I think the AI is the answer for all these demand planning complexities. So there is definitely, it's a sweet spot, and there is a resurgence around the AI in this forecasting arena.
Great, thanks, Jay. Who actually got the answer correct of 50%? I hope you're all putting your hands up and saying you guessed right too. Really interesting. Thanks, Jay. It'll be a great time now to bring Alex and Matthew onto the stage. Alex is the head of supply chain at Royal Sanders, and the sponsor panelist, Matthew, is from Tithe. Welcome, both of you.
Hi, Laura. Nice to be with you.
Hi.
Hi, Laura. Nice to be here.
Hi, Alex. Alex, you've read the news article. What are your thoughts? And listening to Jay as well, do you agree? Do you agree with his points?
Yeah, the article is. I think it's quite controversial in some regards. In that it's trying to say. I think the headline is that they made 10 predictions, and number 2 was that by 2023, 50% of all supply chain forecasts will be automated using artificial intelligence, improving accuracy by 5 percentage points. I think that's a bold statement, if I'm being honest. I guess it's, where did they set their baseline for the improving accuracy? Because if they set it 12 months ago, I think you could probably do it with a dartboard rather than an AI system. Just given the amount of inaccuracy that there's been during the pandemic. I mean, just to pick up on that comment that they've made about using artificial intelligence, I think it's key as well to differentiate between artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the artificial intelligence is more about a computer making its own decisions and mimicking human behavior, whereas machine learning is basically building on a foundation of data science that humans have created to set algorithms, and then to basically improve those algorithms using larger data sets, which I think is what Jay was kind of alluding to with the large data set as well with the weather forecast. Yeah. So, but I thought it was a very good article. I thought that the overriding drive is to try and improve inventory accuracy, which everybody wants to do. I think depending where you sit in supply chain, you've kind of got some camps that sit in, say, the DDMRP section, which is saying, you know, we don't need a forecast, because we can go and control things with manual triggers and buffers and things like that. And then you've got the other side of people saying we can use technology for this and we can improve with algorithms and machine learning and things. I mean, in my background, I did 4 years worth of consultancy for Infor, implementing these systems across Europe for some really good large companies. And I think the thing that set those companies apart from other companies who weren't using forecasting is how much they invested in the process, how much they looked at getting better data, how much they went to get the great people to come and do the demand planning, and also looking at the supply planning side. So technology can only go so far, and I'm sure there is a long way to go in terms of machine learning, which can increase that image accuracy. But I think you've got to have all parts of the jigsaw there to help you deliver it.
Great, thanks, Alex. Yeah, that's a good point. Matthew, any comments on the article from yourself?
Yeah, well, you know, being from a real-time supply chain visibility company, I really enjoyed the article. I think there was a lot of food for thought there, and I think it shows that as a company type, we're certainly heading in the right direction. I mean, listening to Jay, I mean, one prediction, you know, I think I can confidently make is that supply chain planners and logisticians will always want to know where their shipments are. And I think, or, you know, possibly even where they aren't. So, you know, I think again, you know, that's something where us at Tide, you know, we're here for supply chain planners, you know, as a tool for them. I think specifically in the article, you know, I was particularly drawn to the bullet point towards the end of it in the concluding paragraph where it talks about full integration with all enterprise systems, new and legacy systems, equipment are connected, providing a real-time view into supply chain performance and needs. And certainly from our experience, the trends we're spotting with our customers are planners are perhaps moving away from Excel spreadsheets, or they're looking to bring together a number of different pieces of software to give them the intelligence and the data they need. And they're getting used perhaps to some new platforms, like they're combining their Excel planning information with our Tide visibility platform, and then the data they get from that, they're then putting it into an analytics and a visualization software. And I think that process, you know, is one of building trust, of trainability and assurance. I think the other aspect is let's say around machine learning is wondering, you know, when is that going to go mainstream? How will Jay know when his people are using machine learning and they trust it, and for him it's mainstream? And we're already seeing at Tide, you know, a lot of people asking for dynamic ETAs and being able to get actually real-time insights on shipments, irrespective of their mode of travel, be it on land or on the ocean or even in the air. We do have a interesting download actually on our website, which is called How to Build a Supply Chain That Thinks. And it does talk about some of these issues, and possibly Daniel will put it in the chat box there.
Great, thanks, Matthew. I certainly, from the construction industry, are sitting here thinking this article is fantastic. If only we could demand, plan, and forecast just on paper in the construction industry, we could certainly look forward to moving to AI in the future. But perhaps we need to talk to our counterparts in FMCG a bit more. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to the next part of the session, where we can really sort of delve into some insight from our guest speakers. I would like to remind you, the supply chain mug, I don't really need it on my shelf, so I would encourage you to ask some questions. Any questions are good questions. I certainly have a few if you don't want to ask any, and I'm sure the the chat doesn't want to focus around construction, so I urge you to get involved. So, Jay, what visibility and transparency tools can help companies adapt to new market scenarios?
Yeah, I think the way I would articulate, right, demand planning is about both hindsight and foresight, right? So I think a lot of times, people could see it's a forecasting, right? It's all about the future, but not necessarily, right? So I think the hindsight part really matters in the demand planning. It's deep analytics, understanding all the causals, right, that influence the demand planning. What happened in the past cycle, past period, right? Understanding the volatility, understanding the seasonality, understanding what is a signal, what is a noise, right? Putting a context around it, it's a super important because that will shape and inform your future forecasting, right? So it is a little bit of analytics and also art, right? It's not just a pure analytics, right? So that's the hindsight part. Tools and technologies are super important there, especially, the micro segmenting, analyzing, and putting a context around it. You need a lot of, technology as well as, the expertise and art form. Then if you look at the foresight part of the forecasting, right? The way I would see, how do you really understand the signals, whether it's a commercial actions, right? If you're doing a in-store promotion or a web influencer putting a tweet somewhere out there, right? Or it could be some other factors, internal, external. How do you really understand them and factor them right into your forecasting process, right? As a signals. So that is super important. It is not only, statistically generating, but understanding all the things that could really influence forecasting. For this, especially, this area is a very nascent, right? It's very hard, even the large companies, there are a lot of functional silos to really get this information. How do you really break those barriers? And also technology is a big enabler, right? For example, I give you this example. If you give an iPhone app to your marketing salesperson who is making a field trip, and he knows, hey, I'm going to do this promotion next week, Monday. If you could take in a 30 seconds and put it in a phone, right? If that could come as an information input into your demand planning, it's a very powerful way to do it. So in essence, I think you need technology. You also need very diligent way of looking this data, analyze, and making meaning out of that.
Great. We've actually had a question from John Richards, and I'm going to pose this back to you, Jay, at this point. How has your demand forecast strategy changed since the pandemic? If so, do you think you'll keep up the changes going forward?
Yeah, I think the change, a big change, is understanding the volatility, right? Especially during pandemic, every CPG company we have seen, as the markets, the stores, closing, opening, right? All this created a lot of volatility. But how do you really, from that volatility, understanding what is noise, what is a true volatility, right? That's one thing really. We're going deep and understanding, volatility in many dimensions, right? It's not pure volatility. It's something we could factor in, and influence the future forecast. The other thing, our data, during pandemic, it's every CPG company probably experienced it. Our data is very distorted, right? Typically forecasting used, last 2 years or 3 years of data to forecast, forward-looking forecast. No, you can't use the data meaningfully, right? That data is, disrupted, corrupted. So you have to make a lot of inferences to build the data sets and use it. Those two things, things top of my mind. The other thing is the agility, right? Your cycles needs to be much more faster. You can't wait for a month. But, it's information latency. How can you accelerate and do a faster cycle? So that's probably the third one.
Great, thanks, Jay. Alex, have you changed your demand forecast strategy since the pandemic?
I think there's numerous stages that we've gone through. So I work in FMCG, and I guess when March 2020 came around, the start of the pandemic, it was almost like a tidal wave hit within a week, 2 weeks. Just so you know, we make a lot of our products is hand wash, hand sanitizer. So we were kind of in the best place for our customer base. I'd say the first part is demand was totally unforecasted because it was a pandemic, and the second thing is how do you cope with that demand? Because there is only so much capacity that you can employ. It's only so quick that you can ramp up to provide to everybody. So one of the things that we did is we worked very closely with our customer base. We've got some great customers. And I was going to come back onto this. I think the key thing that we've not talked about is collaboration. I've seen really, really good collaboration this last 2 years with customers. And it's been needed because it's not a case of just taking the data, adding a bit of market intelligence and coming up with a net forecast and then using it throughout your systems to plan what you're going to supply. It's basically become about what does the customer need? And then you have to have maybe some honest conversations with customers saying, we can only do this much and we can supply this. And that has worked really well because we've had that partnership with our customers. And that was in the eye of the storm in March 2020. Because we had those conversations, we then knew how we needed to react. Throughout the pandemic, we were having weekly calls with our customers, finding out what they wanted, how we could best serve them. So a lot of the algorithmic approach, data sets and things, I would say in the first 6 months of the pandemic was very much replaced by customer relationships. What did they need? How could we help them? And I would then say probably from about Q4 2020, we started to manage just on a regular demand planning basis for life getting back to, and I hate to say it, the new normal, which has been good for us. But as Jay said quite rightly, there's absolutely no way that you can use the demand sets from the past 18 months to calculate a forward forecast. And as I say, it's all about relationships for me this last 2 years.
I really liked that, Alex, and it warms me to hear that other people had that collaboration at the front of the pandemic. We certainly did in the construction industry, working together to get the manufacturers back open to meet the demands that we were facing. So that's really nice to hear. Matthew, going back to the question around what visibility and transparency tools can help companies adapt to new market scenarios, what's your thought around that?
Well, I mean, that's very much what Clive is. We are a tool for visibility and transparency, and our slogan is every shipment matters. And we provide the technology to help supply chain planners and managers do their job. I mean, one thing we've noticed last year was we did a survey of our customers, and we found that 52% were using a real-time tracker for the first time. So one thing we're seeing is a shift, let's say, perhaps from loggers, like passive devices being used within the supply chain, to real-time. And obviously being able to get real-time visibility is an increasingly useful tool. The other aspect of that is the multimodal capability of the technology. So being able to use one device to track land, ocean and air cargo seamlessly. So I mean, in particular, with Tithe, not only are we a device company, we also provide everything goes into the cloud. It can be integrated in transport management systems and planning systems for collaboration and data extraction. And also, we provide an API tool for third-party software integration. Slightly on a bigger picture, we take the kind of technology ecosystem very seriously, and we look to foster collaborations, and we're building a network of partners that we call the Open Visibility Network. And this not only gets real-time location, but also it integrates many more data streams. And we're doing that with partners like P44, Everstream Analytics, FourKites, and several others.
Great, thanks, Matthew. James, you've also asked an interesting question. Technologies such as analytics and machine learning will play a major role, but to be effective, they must be supported by new processes, talent, and governance. How do you see that evolving? I open that up to Jay. How do you see that evolving? You did mention there is a human element to this.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost see them as a three legs of a stool, right? Without any one leg, they will not work together. Like our experience is machine learning, AI, a lot of hype around the board. I think really what matters is you can only build a best machine learning on a best process platform, right? If you have a scrappy processes, you can't build a machine learning. As simple as that. The other very important aspect is the talent, right? So how do you really? There's a lot of tribal knowledge, the content sitting in a planner's mind. How do you really decodify, integrate with machine learning? Also, how do you run it? So I think a supply chain talent, not only digital savviness, right, the divergent ideas, how to really come with the mindset of continuous improvement. They all comes together, make it work. So I mean, I know there's a lot of hype around, hey, it's a autonomous supply chain, just run a machine learning, you don't need people. That's not true.
Great, thank you. So Alex, how are digital tools evolving to take us towards a more agile and resilient supply chain?
Good question. I think we've probably touched on a little bit about the machine learning. I think that is kind of the processor in everything. But I think there's a whole foundation stage below the machine learning. So, and Jay and Matthew also spoke about it, because we look at the end-to-end picture of supply chain. And at one side, we're looking at demand data. So what are we selling? How close can we get to that customer? Can we get point of sale data? How quick can we get it? So gone are the days where we're waiting for a week to see what the sales were for the previous week. Yeah, we need to be able to see in the day, by hour, or we need to be looking at the next day, worst case. So we need to be getting that kind of demand data, supply information. So what are our live inventories? Whether that's via portals, whether that's by EDI links. I mean, going down the road, I know it's infant technology, but blockchain's got a potential role to play in maybe succeed in some of the EDI initiatives that we currently have out there in the supply chain field at the minute. But the more information we get, and the quicker the information we get, the quicker we can start to react to trends. And I would caveat that by saying that is against baseline demand. So whenever you're talking promotions or events, something that has a causal factor to it, they're obviously a lot more difficult. I would always say, if it is a promotion and you're working with a retailer or an end client, do the work up front, because a lot of these end customers, they plan their ranges, they plan all the events, the promotions, the activity. It's a big thing. They plan it weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. So there shouldn't really be a reason why you can't plug that market intelligence into your forecast. That's just a good old-fashioned communication channel with your clients. The rest of it on the baseline, that is very much looking at real-time data, good data sets, making good decisions on maybe how you aggregate the data and forecast from that level. Yeah. So at what level within the supply chain do you, the demand hierarchy, do you want to actually forecast that information so you can start to take some bigger picture decisions rather than right down at the lower level? So I think from a demand and supply, we can use that information, digital tools, We've got IBP that's been around for a number of years, but that is becoming more and more and more sophisticated, which is ultimately starting to replace the SNLP ways of working.
And for my, sorry, what's IBP?
So IBP, Integrated Business Planning. So the idea of the old-fashioned sales and operation planning, or SNLP, apologies for the acronyms.
They're SNLP, I didn't know the IBP. So.
Yeah, so but for the old SNLP, it's been around for 30, 40 years, and it's been a case of people have used old methods of data collation to go through a typical Oliver White process steps that you can eventually come up with a business plan on a cyclical monthly basis to get everything running. But that has had a lot of people using Excel and other sources of information. Integrated business planning is taking all those data sets and feeds that Jay was talking about, and maybe some of the tide information that Matthew's on about, and really using it as a data set, and then building it up so you can look at the demand side, then the supply side. They can do your financial consolidation and eventually publish that plan. So it's almost like SNLP, but within one business suite.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple of other questions here, which is great. Thank you, everyone. So from Paul Warner, do you envisage a time when demand planning AIs will actually take over the procurement process? And I think he's talking about from demand forecast to procuring to inventory management. Jay, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to my comment I made early on, right? Predictive models are heart and soul of the AI machine learning. And if you could see the interconnectedness, right? It's not only the forecasting of finished product, right? There is a big need to forecast your commodities, for example, right? I mean, we have seen it during pandemic. The scarcity of the basic commodities, the supply disruptions. How can you really decouple, for example, materials from your finished product? Could you do independently, right? That is a big use case around AI machine learning. So I do see, it will be pervasive, AI machine learning areas. Again, there's different, AI is different from machine learning. But in general, I see, predictive models will run behind all the supply chain core processes, whether it's a demand forecasting, inventory planning, or it's material planning, MRP. All the traditional ways of doing will transform over the next couple of years for sure.
Great, thank you. Matthew, do you see it eventually taking over the whole procurement process?
Well, AI.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be interesting to see how it develops. Again, for me, I take a lot of interest in the human factor. It's how it evolves, with humans really, and I think there's still always going to be a relationship there. I think the interesting thing from our side, being a hardware manufacturer, is our role in that, and at which point does our technology start in that process, and do we have robots automatically attaching our sensors to shipments in warehouses? So I think there's some very exciting and interesting questions there. Yeah,
definitely. Excellent. So how can we safeguard our global supply chains and strengthen them against future disruption? Alex, do you want to have a go answering this one?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I noticed in the comments, actually, I'm just looking for the person who asked the question. Let me just find it. John Richards. He called it a black swan event. Yeah, which I've not heard of that term before, so I thought it's quite a good description. I think the first thing to say is the unpredictability and uncertainty we've had in the last 2 years, nobody could have predicted it. So it's I think created some learning lessons. I think when you look at things that you can do to strengthen your supply chain, I think there's some technology things, there's supplier relationships is probably the key, and I think there's some geographical things you could do. So, so if we talk about the supply relationship bit first, I think just like we said at the beginning of the pandemic, we were working closely with our clients. We were, but we were also simultaneously working incredibly close with our supply base. Because if you look at it, everybody kind of started to go down with COVID at different times. It was kind of a domino effect. So you may be, and Duncan came up with a great analogy, I think, at the back end of last year, and called it whack-a-mole. And it very much is. You're hitting one, and then another will pop up over here, and that's what you're kind of doing. And as one of my colleagues described it, he said the world is on fire, and it was. You were trying to put out fires all over the world. So the key thing for me was having those relationships with your vendor base, understand what constraints they had, and what they could do to ensure they've got a safe supply. Yeah. So if you were operating in one country, did they have a backup alternative in a different country that you could source to? From a geographic point of view, I think it became very apparent that if you're sourcing, maybe if you're buying in the UK, for instance, I know Jay's in the US, but if you were buying, say, from the Far East, you had a lot of issues with freight, which Matthew's product would be great to actually give us that visibility to say, okay, whereabouts is this product? Because you have a lot of blank sailings and things like that. As well as certain ports getting COVID and delays and crews being affected on ships. So I would say that there's an element of risk assessment and maybe look at inshoring rather than outsourcing. What can we do regionally, maybe in Europe or in the UK itself? And then from a technology point of view, again, it just goes back to that visibility of data. The more information you can get quicker allows you to make those decisions in a more timely fashion. So I always say that bad news is better to break early. You know, it doesn't get any better with age, the bad news.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. That was a really great response to that question. And sorry to put you in the hot seat there. And welcome to Jay's dog, who made his first appearance on Supply Chain Talk. But Jay, tell me a little bit around how you can safeguard your global supply chain and strengthen it against disruption.
Yeah, I think the first thing comes to mind is I think we need to acknowledge we are in the territory of the volatility, right? After the decades of stability, I think, at least in my personal opinion, we are in the coming decades. There will be increased volatility in business ecosystems, right? Whether it's a pandemic related or it's an ecological, socio-political. There's many things will create a lot of churn in the global supply chain. The another important pivot I see it here is, I think global integration of supply chains is complete. If you look at how we are sourcing material coming from Africa, going to South Asia, right? They're coming to the Western Hemisphere, right? So we are really truly a connected global network. What that really means, every blip, right? Every volatility blip in supply chain, it amplifies, magnifies, right? So that's what we are seeing. This is a cusp of that volatility. I see. I think there's a general realization within the supply chain community. What are the strategies? How do you really go after and address this volatility? Because it's not going to go away, anytime sooner. I would see 3 or 4 important strategic shifts we need to make in supply chains, right? One, I would say globalization. What I call, our supply chains are global. How do you really bring in localization part of the supply chain? How do you build a resilient supply chain, whether it's a nearshoring or reshoring? It could be many things. How do you put supply close to the demand is part of that equation. right? That's one. And also decoupling. How do you really see your network? There is a buffers you build into network by decoupling these, global networks, right? That's an important aspect. Third one, I would say anticipate. Don't sit and wait for things to happen. I think you have really shifted mindset, looking from a risk perspective, anticipate the things, do scenarios evaluation, right? How do you really simulate, what could happen potentially, right? That's one other area, so that you're prepared for it. Third, don't miss this opportunity. This crisis is the biggest opportunity to digitize your supply chain. What that really means, look at your cycle times, look at your information latency, look at your transparency, visibility, all those dimensions. The digitization could help tremendously, right? So these are the, tactics, I would say, relies a lot on the digitization, but also focus on structural agility, right? This is very important. There's nothing to do with the digitization. How do you build a resilient supply chain, like, putting supply close to the demand, cut back the lead times, building the factory buffers, all those things you could do without digitization. They could also help in managing these disruptions.
Great, thanks, Jay. Matthew, what do you think we can do to safeguard our global supply chains? And I'd be really interested to understand how you kind of sell the investment in implementing some of the systems that you have.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I mean, I would just like to just follow on with first with just what Jay said. I completely agree. I mean, we see disruptions as an opportunity for innovation and to create value for our customers. And for example, we see these disruptions, if they become opportunities, the safeguards themselves can have multiple upsides. So for example, there was driver shortages. This needs route optimization for inland transportation. So you make drivers become more efficient because you have a limited number of drivers. Now, at the same time, that ticks the box in a sustainability agenda. So for a green agenda, you're using less road miles, and obviously that's good for the environment. I mean, in particular, in terms of what you mentioned in terms of return on investment. I mean, we have a customer we're working with at the moment who is deploying our units, and they're testing their SLAs against real world scenarios on shipping lanes. So what they're finding is their shipping lanes are unnecessarily long. They're a lot longer than they were planning for. So they're able to shorten them. They're able to renegotiate the terms with their shipper. And at the same time, they're then able to reduce their inventory and manage their inventory in a much more efficient way. I mean, there's a lot of benefits we see. It's not just in being able to save costs, which more than pay for the investment in the technology, but there's also eliminating delays, damage, failures in the shipping process, being able to identify when a shipment could be falling behind schedule, and then take a procedure to rectify that. We actually also have a managed services department, which is providing 24/7 coverage of shipments in case customers want that. So alerts can be escalated to planners who are involved in the supply chain. But I think also, one of the investments that comes back is in just being able to identify trends in performance and being able to make improvements. And that's something that's a big return on the investment for our customers, very much so.
Great, thank you, Matthew, for that insight. We've got a question from Trudy, and I'm not going to be mean and actually point it to anyone in particular. I'll open it up to anyone who feels comfortable answering it. Anyone have any idea how the unfolding of the Ukraine crisis will affect supply chains in the coming months, as that seems to be a reactive situation?
Yeah, again, it's a territory of volatility, right? To my earlier point, they could be Ukrainian situation, they could be something else, right? It could pop up. But how do you really anticipate? I'll go back to my point. As you see this information unfolding, right? How many supply chain, leaders really taking a deeper look into their supply chain from a risk sense, right? Or where is the supply lines? Is a potential disruption? What could be different scenarios it could evolve, right? Historically, this approach is part of the long-term strategic planning, right? That's what companies used to do as part of your budgets, cycles. But now we are in a highly volatile territory. You have to do everyday basis these things, right? That's could be the best response in this situation.
Yeah, I have to agree. Business continuity plans that involve supply chain are now part of the future for me. Certainly wasn't before. I'm sure it was all IT focused, but yeah, it's certainly one to be. As you say, I think we all said there's always something around the corner. Alex, any thoughts on what the next Ukraine crisis will do to supply chains?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Hopefully, it doesn't come to anything or gets diffused. I think that's the first thing to say. The tentacles of a potential conflict could spread wide. So I think it's anybody's guess. I did read an article yesterday. I think it was on LinkedIn, and it was from one of the shipping lines or related to shipping news. And it was saying that it does have the potential to raise the costs for shipping lines. And anybody who's been importing using the shipping lines from east to west will know that prices have gone up fivefold in the last 18 months. So the last thing that anybody wants to see from a supply chain and cost-based point of view is to see some more unexpected cost enters to the supply chain.
Yeah, I think I started this talk saying uncertainty is the new certain, and it unfortunately follows the talk that I was a guest speaking at last week, which basically suggests that this isn't going to end, not really for the next 6 months, and maybe this is the new norm. So I think we've answered. Here we go. John, did we answer your question? I think we did around the black swan, didn't we? And certainly Ukraine is probably another black swan. Matthew, sorry, Jay.
Yeah, I would say the COVID could probably the black swan, right? But also, there could be more of them coming in future, right? So just prepare, anticipate, and build a resilience into supply chain. That's a new norm, new reality.
Yeah, great. Matthew, any ideas as to how to deal with the unpredictable world that we live in right now?
I wish I had some. I think the best thing is we just all hope for some peace in that region. I mean, with regard to that specific problem that's developing, it would not surprise me at all if our customers who are shipping from the east start wondering if they should put trackers on the shipments just to see exactly what routes and lanes they're taking. I think cargo does go across the Black Sea. I'm quite sure how much of it does, but I think there is quite extensive cargo going across there. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, this supply chain talk has come to an end. I would really like to continue talking with you all. Thank you so much for being great guests today. And thank you very much to our viewers who've asked some really interesting questions and really challenged our guest speakers to really kind of delve into a world that we've been living in over the last 2 years. So thank you again. Next week, Duncan will be joined by some great guests to discuss the decentralization of distribution and manufacturing. So hopefully you'll all be able to log into that one. The award is going to go to, although everyone wanted it to go to your dog, Jay, I think what we'll have to do is give it to John, as he has asked the most questions today and some really interesting ones. So John Richards, a Supply Chain Talk mug will be on its way to you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining Supply Chain Talk.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye.